Hello and welcome, everyone. Here we are again for another episode of Being Healthy. Today, we're going to look at what I think is the one issue that stops us all from experiencing being healthy. For me, and from all the work I have done with myself and with others, what I see as being the dominant factor across the board is the element of fear. And that's what we'll be discussing today. So, welcome all. If you are here as a participating audience, we do invite you to come in and give your own stories too, and to comment below. You'll look in the comment section, and towards the end, we're going to bring you in, and we're going to be very interactive with you in a live chat. In the meantime, let's look at the physiology of fear.
You've probably heard of fight or flight, which is the response the body has to stress or fear. Let's use the interactive 3D models in Human Anatomy Atlas Plus and Physiology and Pathology to walk through the body's fear response. A chain reaction is triggered when you perceive a threat. First, your amygdala sounds the alarm. The amygdala is part of your brain that, among other things, connects memory and emotion. The amygdala calls upon the hypothalamus, which acts as your body's switchboard, sending signals to the rest of your endocrine system. That's how the message gets to the adrenal glands. You have 2 adrenal glands, one atop each kidney, and they produce and release hormones directly into the bloodstream. In the stress response, the adrenal glands release epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epinephrine signals a number of changes in the body that you might recognize. Your lungs expand and the rate of respiration increases, so your body takes in more oxygen to deal with the threat. Your heart beats faster. Your pupils dilate, and your muscles begin to tense up. The body deems some functions like digestion unnecessary in a dangerous situation and begins to slow them down. If the threat sticks around, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands get ready for round 2. The hypothalamus releases a hormone called CRH, which signals the pituitary gland to release ACTH. ACTH in turn signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol, often called the stress hormone. Cortisol helps give the body the energy it needs to stay on high alert for a bit longer by signaling several organs in the body to make changes impacting blood glucose levels. When the threat is over, your body starts to wind back down. Cortisol levels decrease, and your body starts to go back to its everyday functions. Want to learn more about the anatomy and physiology of stress? Visible Body Web Suite has all the 3D gross and microanatomy models and physiology animations you need, as well as 3D flashcard decks for studying. Learn.
Okay, so why am I showing the physiology of fear here? Because of the adrenal glands. It's a huge glandular issue. And most people's adrenals are shot. When clients or anybody else says to me, I'm so tired today, I know behind that is an element of fear. Somewhere along that, fear is lurking. Every time I see a problem with adrenals that are weak, I know that fear is the issue. That's where I go first to address it. And that is why I think it's the most important topic for us to discuss when we're considering what it takes to be healthy. So being healthy means the adrenals are functioning. For the adrenals to be functioning, the kidneys must also be filtering properly. For the kidneys to filter properly, you need a whole set of stuff to be happening, including that the lymph needs to be decongested as well. For the lymph to be decongested, you have to have a mindset of health and wellness, because here is the problem. Every time we think a thought that's fearful, it ends up in the physical body. So a lot of illnesses, we're told that they cannot be cured. Nothing gets cured. We just heal ourselves. And the reason why is because medical professionals are not taught to look at fear as being the root cause, which is what we're doing today. So with that said, I'm going to bring in our co-hosts to have a look at what they understand and what they mean by fear, starting with Grant.
Hey, Dory. Yeah, fear. It's a big one. It definitely gets in the way of a lot of people's health. Um, Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of so many different things, and it makes people make crazy choices. It makes people do the opposite of what they really value. Um, it really is insane, and as you mentioned, it does take over. Um, like your adrenals are so important, and when they're shot, when that organ gets overworked, people living in stress and worry all the time, it doesn't work well, especially with coffee addictions and all these other problems people go to try to stay awake once their adrenals start failing. So yeah, it's a really kind of vicious circle. People don't realize they're doing it to themselves. Um, it's easy to feel like a victim and feel like your environment just causes your stress, but it's an internal state that we own and are responsible for. And yeah, it takes work. It's just a part of personal development that unfortunately gets neglected a lot in society. But it's super important for health.
I'm so glad you brought up the idea of coffee, because that is usually most people's response when their adrenals are low. And when it's shot, they just drink more coffee, which is the very opposite of what they need to be doing. If they just work with somebody and looked at where the stresses of their lives are, but somebody who really understands that the stresses of their lives are caused by some degree of fear, something they're hanging on to. Doesn't matter if the fear comes from the past, or you brought it into you from your childhood, or you took on the fear of your own family or your society at large or your community, whatever. There's a huge element of fear there. And that's why it must be addressed for every single medical issue. The fear that is behind is creating this depletion within us. That's what we need to look at. So thanks for mentioning coffee, because when one drinks coffee, then because one needs energy to get through the day, especially if you have babies, that's actually the last thing you ought to be doing. Just look at the fear, and that your adrenal glands will be restored as long as you heal the issue behind the fear. So that's really critical. So thanks for bringing up coffee, because that is not at all how we heal. It might be something that we put off. We're using the coffee to put off dealing with the fear, but if we never deal with the fear, we're just going to get more and more sick, because without the adrenals, we're all lost. So with that said, Blythe, please come on in. Unmute yourself first, please, Blythe.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much. I feel like the real antidote to fear is having a relationship with the universe that you really trust, because there will always be fear until we understand how to live in faith. And when we all have those moments of fear, and for me, it like hits me like 4 a.m. I go to bed early, so I'm always up at like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. And if there's something that I'm working on, that there's a tone of fear in it, it always comes up to me then. And you just make that moment to say, like, to have the trust that you're aligned. I have the trust that I'm aligned with my action for the day and my choices, and I have faith in the universe. And I really have a relationship with the universe that allows me now, honestly, to live in a place where fear is, I don't experience it very much. And probably that's why I truly feel so vital. What you're saying about the adrenals, it's so, I really experience that. It's like, I have so much energy, and I didn't really, put that together necessarily with that piece, but, shows that has a lot to do with our energy or our depletion, is if we're in a state of fear or if we're in a state of faith. And, we can always choose. We always can choose our thoughts. We can choose our feelings. And that's how we work on our self-mastery. And so, that's what I practice, is just having a relationship with the universe. What's to fear there?
Thank you for bringing up the idea of faith, because faith is exactly the opposite of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that you don't have faith in the outcome. You don't have faith in yourself. Usually that's what it is. You don't have faith in yourself in a specific circumstance, or in a situation. And that is where the fear comes in. But remember, it does suck you dry on a logical level. It does. So with that said, I'm going to bring in Pete.
Whoop. Hi, hot topic. I couldn't resist but to put a lot out there on my Instagram, Facebook. So fear, I suppose many people could interpret it different ways, and even though there is a general consensus. I remember when I was 17, which got me into these, let's just say, more introspective workshops, dreams, daily dreams, daily diary, rebirth, breath work, learning astrology. So why did I go? I had questions. I was fearful of the dark. I had no information beyond that, and death and dark. And then so a little voice in me like, right, this has come your way, jump in. So I was, in some respects, challenging the spiritual, let's just say, alternative reality, which I didn't know hardly anything of. So from that experience, I'm delving into my inner world, inner me, what I believe. I look back in retrospect, all my, let's just say, inner repressed aspects of myself. So I had not experienced many of them, and so let's just say they were more stagnant, pent up. So many questions that did get answered around that time. However, I got released a lot of, let's just say, my trauma within that unknown trauma that I would never have revisited or reknown if I had not got into that, let's just say, kind of inner work. So I would have probably gone through my life with many different other addictions. And then I revisited it when I was 13. I remember in these groups, I had a visit to India, an ashram in India. I popped there for 10 days, and there was some workshops, and we had questions. And it's like, what do you fear the most? There was about 20 of us. And in this is my honest truth. I said, I fear fear. Now I look back and I think, how ridiculous. But that was my reality. Still, after a lot of work done already. So yeah, if you break it down, false evidence appearing real. So that opens up a whole many layers for me. So I use that term, false evidence appearing real, as opposed to fear. So if you keep throwing that in, keep throwing that in. I would throw it in as a mantra. Different sensations, different feelings, any feeling that associated with fear, a feeling, let's just say, to me, is just a disconnect from our true trust, beautiful words, having faith, trust in who we ultimately are. There's tools to get back to that, or have glimpses of that to work on that and sustain that. So fear, I could go on and on and on, and then we pass it down. You could spoon fed, I would say, movies, through media, pop music, every day we can be subject to that program. However, it's being aware of many of them things, and then bringing in more positive programs that are kind of serving you, the more inner you, as opposed to the ego identity, you. But I better stop there.
Thank you, Pete. And thanks for bringing up that probably the greatest fear that most people have is death. We will actually be focusing on that later, but hopefully we'll have enough time, because for some reason that is one of the biggest fears for most people. So Sabina, please come in and enrich us with your own experiences and thoughts.
Hello, everyone. And yes, fear, it's a very deep topic and has many different layers. And sadly, most people walk around in constant fight or flight mode. They're constantly in the fear paradigm. And what I have learned on my journey, that fear actually can be a catalyst. When we learn that fear is actually based on our beliefs. So in my case, when I was facing a lot of fear, I learned to trust, because there's something on the other side of fear. And usually on the other side of fear is something we desire. There's often next level freedom. So I now use fear as the catalyst. Whenever fear shows up, I move into fear and I trust in the process and I breathe through it. I move through it with all the tools I have available. But every time I face my fears, I realized it wasn't actually so bad as I thought to begin with. So often the mind can deceive us. And that's really when the medicine comes in, like we already mentioned, of trust and faith. And then learning to, have tools, how to dance with the fear. It's one of the things I dance with my fear. And I have found tremendous freedom. And that's always when we learn how to move into those forces that are just here as the teacher and the messenger. And there's so much available when we learn to trust in the process of facing fear.
Great. Thank you so much for that. So let's go then into the general question, actually. So Pete brought up death. How about the thing we fear most is life? Because that's what I've noticed, that people do not live their lives fully, nor do they embrace any and every single event that shows up in their life, because to live fully means you embrace everything, you accept everything. So I think what people fear even more than death is their own lives and their lives. So why? Because fear is not really the problem. It's our attachment to it that is the problem, or attachment to the fear. And so the only thing to do is walk yourself through, or like Sabina said, dance through the fear. So having said that, I would like to think about you all, to think about everybody, including the audience. What did you fear most as a child? Do you remember the first time you felt fear, and what was it? And just pop on in. So
Yeah,
I'll start. Oh, I'll start. So my biggest fear as a child was adults, because they really were in my way. Adults really seemed to have their own loss of grip on life and the magical kingdom that in which we lived. And so when I was held down to be inoculated as a child by several adults, I was really upset, because I knew that I didn't want this thing inside of me, and they insisted on putting it there. I was the healthiest child possible, and they, as far as I'm concerned, as a child, took my health away from me. We'll go into that another time. But to me, I feared adults. And that was my greatest fear. So Grant, come on in.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of fears, Dorit. I can kind of relate to what you talked about, but for me, it was more about shyness and a lack of confidence, and that affects everything. So I, was afraid of, like growing up, more became about afraid of public speaking, and after what Sabina was talking about dancing, it reminded me actually that during the pandemic, I overcame my fear of dancing and actually learned to dance in Mexico, where I ended up during the pandemic. But I was so afraid of everything. I was afraid of even just like meeting females. Growing up, I had trouble looking into people's eyes, even guys' eyes. Like, just I felt like I was invading their privacy, invading their space if I looked into their eyes for more than just a moment. And really, it was about me, not about them. But I felt like it was about them at the time, and I didn't realize that until later in life. I had awkward meetings with people because I would be, say I was meeting. It didn't matter if it was my someone, a distant family member, or someone older than me or my own age, but any especially females that I would meet, I would have an awkwardness about meeting them, and I wouldn't know whether to kiss them on the cheek or hug them or just shake their hand or nothing, stand back. And so I created this awkwardness, and I'm not looking in their eyes. And that's when you're first meeting somebody, it's like a lasting impression. So that was my first impression. So fear has such a huge effect on life, and like Sabina was kind of saying, it's a practice of learning tools to get out of that, and I certainly came up with a lot of those practices through life.
And studies have been done that have showed that most people, even more than death, although a lot of people do fear death, what they fear the most is public speaking. Public speaking is what they fear the most, which really, for me, is shocking because I was just an authentic, even as a child, public speaker. I've never understood not doing that. I was elected president of the Debate Society because I had no fear at all in speaking, but I was stunned when I found out that most people's, the majority of fear is around, for most people in the world, the entire world, it's public speaking. Did any of you ever have that?
No, I didn't. And that's so interesting. I'd be so curious to know what's behind that, like being afraid to be seen. What would be the root that so many people experience that would make them afraid to be seen? I did not have that, but I'll have a very vulnerable share if I can share it without crying. And I didn't even really realize this because I've never once thought about it until Dorit asked it. But honestly, it sounds so crazy to say this, but I feel like my biggest fear as a child was my mother. And that's horrible. And I've made such a conscious effort as a parent to that, that my children would never fear me, that I don't bully parent in any way. I have such a connected, democratic relationship with my kids. Everyone has a say, everyone has power, and that's not at all how I was raised. I was raised with the parent has all the power, the child has no power, and you do what you're told or you're slapped in the face or something worse. And so, yeah, my mom, now I'm going to cry. You can take it off me.
Well, this is excellent that you're crying because this is how we heal. And you've got to be very careful then because you might overcompensate for your relationship with your mother, that you do not go the opposite way with your children too, because then the fear is still there and that's what's leading the parenting style that you have, which reminds me, everyone who's listening, the entire month of May next month, we're going to be working on parenting.
That's beautiful.
So because there's so many, and because everything we've done so far works up to it, you'll see that every single time we do a show, it has that one leads into another. You might not see the connection, but eventually you'll see it. When we start doing parenting, you'll see why we did those shows and those themes before we did parenting.
But I do have to say, I disagree in the sense that it's wrong to that going the opposite direction is such a great choice for me. And that's not at all fear-based. It's so love-based. And it's so, that's how, if we how can we expect to have world peace? How can we expect for our countries to communicate peacefully if parents are not communicating peacefully 100% of the time with their children? And for me, there's no excuse to be any other way. And the bully parent attitude has to be up-leveled in our culture for sure.
Remind us when we're doing the month on parenting to bring that up. Parents as bullies or bully parenting. That would be a wonderful topic.
Pete? They don't even know they're bully parents. That's the thing though. No, they don't. It's people don't acknowledge that that's what's happening, but that is actually what's happening, because when you're such a small child and you have someone 2, 3, 4 times the size of you, even just screaming at you, it's like you say, the physiology of the body, you're literally creating dis-ease in the child. It's the worst thing that you can do to a child's nervous system and a child's physiology.
Absolutely, yes. And it stays because I find that whatever is imprinted in our physiology tends to stay around. And then we spend the rest of our life just trying to heal it. Very interesting. Pete, come on in, please.
Hi, yeah, where to begin it? What Sabina mentioned is beautiful, because in terms of getting an equal balance of the duality, in terms of fear, it's the man-made concept. So, and I do use words where it's this and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that can be a contradiction of, basically a contradiction. Hang on, I've just got disturbed there. A contradiction of everything is perfect and everything is opportunities. So, and as Blythe was mentioning, what I find really amazing here, when I was 17 in these groups, similar here, but let's just say another 13 people, and then, wow, our different realities. At 17, I thought we all generally thought the same, all generally had the same experience. So when I'm here, you, Dorrit, and Blythe mention, had no problem in terms of expressing in public speaking. I was like, Grant, I was riddled with it, in terms of embarrassing myself, or wouldn't want to embarrass myself, So I was the youngest of 6. So in terms of the question, what was my most fear? I have to say, riddled with a lot of stories, lots and lots of stories. So where do I start? So, but what I do remember is seeing in the bedroom all different rounds nearly every night. So my choice, this is me expressing a bit more. So what do I do? At the age of 4, mum had to work late, etc. Between being in the bedroom, haunted to a big degree, or whatever I'm seeing this other realms, or go upstairs and with my bigger brothers and sisters watch Dracula or Frankenstein. Horrific at the age of 4. However, that was part of my, let's just say, the childhood. And there was abuse from a stepdad when around the age of 3, which I didn't really know until I got into these groups. So that kind of covers a lot. But then we do externalize our fears into spiders, moths, ridiculous things that can't really harm you. And if we was able to go to the core issue of that, as many things, blame, guilt, anger, we could, and had the tools and the patience, we could unravel the seed of them. This is what my experience in working with other people I have experienced. And Dorrit, you mentioned, yes, most people are in fear of life. On another level, oxymoron there, fear of death is, we are personally already in death. Our spirit isn't, our child is being traumatized, majority of us, that we are not connected. So we are in a kind of physical spirit death. So I personally believe on a level that we have all the fear, false evidence appearing real, all these programs that are made so massive that the word trauma and the stuff that has affected us, we've got a whole package with that, where it can be so easy. And as Sabina said, we can dance with it, learn to dance with it, and just support each other. I personally believe it would have been with family and friends. We would have all been a bit more functional, all a bit more together. So just in our mutual conversation, great-grandparents wouldn't be so medicated and taken out. Our children wouldn't be so medicated and taken out. So the spirit would be strong in both of them generations. So that would be it, just in our everyday awareness. So wouldn't have to go to therapists, etc., because we would just be balanced there in our conversation, positive conversations, positive communication, love, faith, trust, and not getting caught up in the lower level negativity of many things.
Yes, absolutely. So you spoke here about the fact about grandparents too. And what I find is that fear gets passed down in many ways than one. And sometimes you can do what Blythe does, which is make sure that she doesn't parent like her mother did. But then at some point, the child will go to its grandparent. So it still picks it up in some form. So what I think needs to be done, and when I was a child, and I still do think so, especially as a teenager, I thought so, that before people became parents, they should go to university for parenting, and that they should take exams. And only then could they get a license to be a parent. I thought that was really, really critical and crucial. And I didn't understand why it wasn't done. So I kept saying, when I'm prime minister, if I'm ever prime minister, that's the first law I'm going to pass. So my fear was not of adults, was not of the adults themselves. It's the fact that they seem to have the delusion that they had power and that they had power over me. They didn't have power over me because my thoughts just got stronger. I got even more stubborn in the way that I was thinking and what I wanted. And all the fights was over the fact that I loved fruit, and that's all I wanted to eat was fruit. Now, I came from a very fruit-centric family. There was always lots of fruit, but I didn't want to eat anything else. And so we had a lot of fights about that. I didn't want to be inoculated. They physically held me down to do that. So I ended up in the hospital after I was inoculated and I think it was more the fear and the fighting that got me into the hospital, because I think my energy system shut down it was a physical fight of a child being held down by several adults just to be inoculated. And so I think that's where all my issues started. But my fear of adults was not of them physically or what they thought, is the fact that I saw them as believing and thinking an illusion that they were in charge of me, and they were not. And that's what scared me, that the fact that they thought they were, because then they acted it out. And because I was a child, I was not able to withstand most of it. And so that was my greatest fear. And so I decided not to have children, because I didn't know what part of that I would then put over on them. And I was afraid of going the opposite way and, bringing up children on the very opposite end of the spectrum too. And I thought, no, these beautiful characters, these beautiful fledgling souls, I don't want to do anything to really, taint their experience here, not realizing, which I realize now, that maybe that was exactly the experience that they came to live. Maybe that was the experience they need. Maybe, Blythe, without that, you wouldn't be who you are now. Maybe I wouldn't be who I am now, which is I'm now eating fruits, and all of them what I want now, and the way I want them, and when I want them, and all day long. And nobody can tell me anyhow more what to eat and what to eat and what not to eat. And so it's interesting, because when Sabina said, you dance your way through fear, Sabina, give us some examples of how you do, because I physically went and danced. Became a dancer on purpose, especially for that. So Sabina, tell us how you dance your way through fear.
Well, the dance that I practice is the 5-rhythm dance. And I started using that when I was left. I was left by my partner, and I faced tremendous heartbreak and just the fear of being alone and, not knowing what's next, how I'm going to live my life with this man who was committed to me for the rest of his life. So the pain was so deep, and I was so afraid of the future, that I started to dance. And I went in the forest at night when the pain was really deep, and I did the 5-rhythm dance, which has these 5 different rhythms. And it's about putting your emotions into the dance. That means when you feel sadness and anger, you put it into the dance. You move, you move through the dance with the emotion. So this is not a dance of looking beautiful. This is a dance of release. Everything gets put into the movement. So the movement becomes the medicine. So that was extremely healing for me, and actually healed very fast from the heartbreak. And I realized, wow, this is so powerful when we have a tool that we can actually use fear and move it through, because it's stored in the body. And so we have to move it out of the body, and simply talking about it does not resolve the issue. So that really helped me a lot, like moving it out. And sometimes I was in such pain when I started the dance, and then at the end I was laughing. I had heart belly laughter, and I was such joy just came through me and out of me. And I realized, wow, I'm in pain because of one man leaving me when we have billions of men on the planet. So I suddenly had a different perspective. So fear got me out of a certain mindset that I'm abandoned and I'm alone, not knowing about the future, and suddenly infinite possibilities about the future.
Wonderful. So let's look at how fear can actually serve us, because fear has that purpose too. It's not all something that depletes us and robs us of our well-being. It can actually assist us. For example, when I lived in New York City, fear was very important, because that's what got me off certain blocks. And then I remember I was coming, I actually took a class in self-defense in New York City, because I was a dancer and I would go to classes at night, and it was so scary that I thought I needed a self-defense class. But the class was held in a neighborhood where you needed self-defense to get into the neighborhood and get out of the neighborhood. I didn't want to start practicing right away. But what it did for me was when I was walking or I turned on the block and I felt fear, and I looked around to see what the reason for it, and I would change. Yeah, I listened to the fear, and most of my life I've lived by instinct and intuition, and that fear saved me in two occasions, because the next day I heard something happen on that same block that I was going down and I turned away from, and it happened twice. And so fear actually can be our partner in well-being. Can you all maybe think about how this really serves us as well, how fear can serve us? Grant, do you want to start?
Certainly. Yeah, I went through a period of outdoor rock climbing, and with big walls, multi-pitch climbs with friends who were experts, and it terrified me. But I loved the athleticism, and it was very challenging, solving problems and all that kind of thing. But it was balanced by fear, because if you don't have fear in that situation, you die. You literally die. So it is self-preserving. And I had an experience as a teenager once at a theme park where they had this tall tower that went up to the sky, maybe more than 100 meters high, and you get in this seat, and they take you up to the top of the tower, and then the television at the top counts down for 3, 2, 1, and then there's this uncomfortable silence that's way more than a second, and you're feeling terrified at that moment because it's going to drop any moment, and suddenly it drops, and you shoot to the ground, and it's terrifying. And I noticed that I didn't breathe on the way down. But when I went on it again, I challenged myself to breathe on the way down. And when I breathed on the way down, the fear didn't exist anymore, because I had something to do. I was doing an activity. It took my mind off being afraid, and I was trying to achieve this challenge. So it's fascinating. Yes, we do have control over fears, and they don't have to rule our lives. And when we face our fear and do it anyway, in safe spaces, obviously, it's empowering, and that empowerment builds courage. And so it's a practice of pursuing things that build courage, and the more you do that, you build confidence, and with confidence, fear isn't in your way anymore, and fear starts to look like a foreign object that is foul, and you avoid feeling fear, and you prefer to just stay relaxed and calm and rational while everything is in fear around you, and just let it be someone else's problem, because it doesn't help me at all. It doesn't serve me. It kept me alive while I was rock climbing and things like that. I still have those natural fears that I think are healthy fears, but I don't experience, I'm kind of like Blythe, I don't really experience fear anymore in normal life.
Thanks for that. Yes, there are so many ways that fear does help us. So we need to look at fear, whether it is driving us or it's just helping us. So Blythe?
Yeah, there's the gift of fear, isn't there? And the curse of fear. And the gift of fear, it's interesting that it is intuitive, isn't it? When we get that feeling of fear, or it's like, you feel it in your body a little bit, but it's something to listen to. The gift of fear, that moment when you know to change direction or not get on that elevator. Or I had an experience the other day at the Sprouts in West Hollywood. The stairs, I like to take stairs instead of an elevator, but this particular staircase has this big open space behind it. And I walked in and immediately felt like the ick, the horrible. And I turned around and there was, a disparaging character, not where they're supposed to be, doing not what they're supposed to be doing in that area. And it was like, get out. That's the gift of fear. That's why we have it. And we have to listen to it. We have to, when it comes in, we have to acknowledge that that's a message, and to honor it so that we stay safe. And that, it is a gift to us in that regard.
Thanks, Blythe. Pete, how has fear been a gift to you?
Yeah, fear. I mean, I've got a few stories. I suppose I got to sort of define between fear and intuition. Intuition to me nowadays is you know, connected, unconnected. That would be more my interpretation. So in terms of fear, so let's just say intuition. I remember 4 years on my journey, so this was 13 years ago, I had certain abscess. I used to have so many teeth stories, so I'd get abscesses. And so I was on the raw food journey thinking, oh, I shouldn't be getting these. But anyway, in retrospect, I can see why. And then after 2 days, one of my side of the glands swelled right up. So I listened for these alarm bells. It's like to that point I would get shown and just shown. It's like, right, I'm not getting any alarm bells. The voice is not telling me anything. Okay. And I'm thinking, right, if the other side swells up, that means I can't even swallow. So I would definitely go to the hospital. Let's just say something like that. This is only my experience. So, so the other side did swell up. I realized that was my first ever dry fast. So I went on for 6 days, I think, going through that potentially detox healing process. I would say that's what it turned out. So I had no alarm bells. So I followed my intuition. And let's just say after about the 6th day, I remember just with a friend, we went just like an old man going down to the sea, wet in the sea, come back out the sea, because the theory cold, hot. At that time, didn't know too much about it. You know, I thought it might shock the system. I came back late, sat in the sun, and then all of a sudden this mass of the most gross stuff come out of my mouth. So that was obviously the abscess. I didn't know it was an abscess at the time. You know, people say, oh, you could have died of that and poison could have got in your body, etc., etc. So I didn't, let's just say, maybe that's not a good interpretation, but I have many like that. That was me listening to a certain connectedness, certain voice that I rekindled, that I realized everyone, I believe, has got. Some more than others, some maybe have to do more work than others, some, you know, let's just say push it down more than others. And so the more we integrate and be that, that's an experience of some of my fear. In the groups, I was jumping hurdle after hurdle. A woman took me under her wing, the teacher tutor. So that was a great experience to jump over a hurdle. And like Sabina mentioned, that was the first imprinting of, oh my gosh, every time you jump that hurdle, jump into that fear, it only gets better. It only gets better. I look back in retrospect, all of my life, all the experiences, whatever you want to call them, positive, negative, they're all I can see. I'm not just rationalizing to make them up to make myself feel better, but the outcome has just been amazing. You know, so then I start realizing the word perfection in terms of how everything is perfection. I had a real hard time getting my head around that. So that's my experience of fear. Every time go through the unreal, false evidence appearing real, reaction, anger, blame, guilt, whatever it may be, you know, terrified, intuitions to me slightly different. Yeah, fight or flight. Anyway, there's quite a bag to interpret there. That's my experience on that one anyway.
Thank you, Pete. So, you know, most of us actually have come with a bag of fear, a huge bag. Some of us come with a suitcase. Some of us come with an enormous schlepping around of fear from the family, fear from our childhood, fear from our friends. And to me, the biggest propagator of fear is mainstream media. So I want you to think now of how mainstream media actually allows us and gives us permission to be fearful and how it feeds the fear. That's what I want you to think about now. How does mainstream everything, not just media, mainstream medicine, mainstream education, everything mainstream, how does it feed the fear? Because to me, they are most of them based on fear mongering. So would my co-hosts come in now and let me know what they think and how they think so. And before we do so, I'm going to put something up on the screen. And I want to, and the reason why I'm asking you all to think about this is because when you're fed fear from so many different sources, it's almost like the fear becomes so hot. It heats you up. You become overheated with fear until it becomes almost like a volcano. And I'm going to put up a quote by someone in my teenage years that really influenced me. He's a Lebanese poet called Khalil Gibran. And what he said was, if you look on the screen, you'll see it here. If your heart is a volcano, how shall you expect flowers to bloom? And yet it seems to be that mainstream everything teaches us to hold on and just pushing more fear and fear into us, that eventually it's like we're volcanoes inside. And we see what's happening in society now. People just acting out with rage all the time. And it all comes from fear. So as Rumi also stated, it's important to put your thoughts to sleep. And that's why I say stop watching mainstream media is the first thing I say to clients. Do not let your thoughts cast a shadow over the moon of your heart. Let go of thinking. If you overthink and you start thinking too much, you become fear-based. So, co-hosts, please think about that and explain to yourself and to me and to everyone else why overthinking is usually what triggers the fear or what feeds it.
Well, to answer your first question about mainstream media, it's all bad news, most of it, right? It's all, so it's a, how can that not generate fear? I've often wondered, like, why don't we have news channels that are just all good news, like the best news ever? This wonderful thing happened, and this wonderful thing happened, and this wonderful thing happened. But the regular news that people watch, it's just one bad news story after another, and they search for it. They're looking for it. What's the bad news? What's the bad news? What's the bad news? What bad news can we share? Why are we sharing bad news? I mean, yeah, okay, we have to stay informed on world affairs to a point, of course, but if we had some understanding of the energy that we put out, we create more of, then we would be entirely different in how we share information.
Yes, agreed. Most definitely, yes. And Grant?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very fortunate to live in a world where we can choose what we watch and what we listen to and what we study and our sources for staying in touch with world news. But I can also see like where the, addiction to watching all these horror stories on mainstream media is. I think people perhaps feel better about their own life when they see someone else suffering, which is unfortunate. But people love to watch like Darwin Awards where people do something foolish and unfortunately die, or some big sports, football game and someone gets some big injury. Everyone's like, oh, you got to watch it over and over again. And people love to see other people get hurt. People love to see other people make mistakes. They love to see politicians make blunders. They love to see, and I really think it's just a basic thing of coming back to feeling better about yourself. And it doesn't need to be that way. If people already felt good about themselves, they wouldn't be looking for that. And so I think the mainstream media, make money and they're playing on that state of individuals where they're kind of kept in fear and kept with their needs unmet. And the pandemic was the most classic example of that, where people were forced to take vaccines or they couldn't work or couldn't, in my sister's case, she couldn't take her children to swimming classes unless she or they got vaccinated. So she got vaccinated in order that her daughters could go, and so they didn't get vaccinated. And it was just all these crazy rules that are just forced on people to control us and keep us in this trap of seeking these horrors and fears of the cycle of negativity. But like I said, we live in a world where we can choose our sources, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's what I do. I don't watch mainstream media at all.
Bravo. Bravo. Sabina, please come on in.
And just like Grant, I don't watch mainstream media. I got rid of my TV, I think 25 years ago. I've never watched TV again. And because I understand how the media works, there's an agenda behind it, as many of you probably know. And it's all about instilling fear and creating confusion. And when people are in fear and confusion, they can very easily be controlled, and they just follow along and follow orders, because fear stops critical thinking. We don't think independently. We don't even think, does this make sense? And we just follow along what others are doing or what the status quo is. So that's the agenda, So it's always good to get rid of the mainstream media and get rid of all TV and radio and really tune in and go into nature. And the guidance will actually come from within. And most people actually, they don't have a lot going on in their life. They don't live in purpose. They don't have a passion. They don't have a creative outlet. So they need something to get stimulated. So they go to Hollywood or to the media in order to get their fix. It's an addiction also, addiction to the adrenaline rush. So I stay away from this for many, many years. I tune into nature. I find joy there every day, and wisdom and beauty. So that's what I focus on.
Wonderful. Excellent. So, Pete, come on in, please.
Yeah, hi. So when my youngest children, my oldest children, apologies, we went to see Jurassic Park way back, and they were about maybe 6 or 7, and apparently it was a PG, and I asked people, you sure it's okay? It was horrific. 6 and 7. So how they make movies PGs, I just cannot believe it. Harry Potter, string the kids along so they all want to watch it, and then it goes like, oh my gosh, like a horror movie. I'm going to say I've been blessed that I watched all that kind of nonsense, and if it wasn't for our newborn now, I would be watching a little bit of it with in different eyes. Blessed that I've had lots of nonsense. Blessed that I've had many, many traumas. So, and come out the other end and a big smile on my face. So the meter is so, as someone's mentioned, it's your reality. That's all you know. Fortunately, some of us here are more blessed and another blessed type of blessing, that they are aware to choose their own reality. They're not so caught up in the addiction, caught up in that false identity of self, and have no sense of self, which I can look back many times of myself, look at many people I've shared with. So some of us are fortunate to even have an sense of self to discriminate between. So some of us are just in that, let's just say, rat race, or running the gauntlet type of, say, use that term. So media, there's a lot of money to be made. Yes, the critical thinking can't come in, keep us as just certain sort of kind of workers for a certain reality, feed off us in many different ways. However, things are changing, and it's so beautiful seeing different, even in some of the movies. I see some amazing positive things in some of the movies. I haven't watched one for a few years, watched documentaries. However, so things are changing if you look globally now. However, once again, the media is controlled. If you just look on certain mainstream, which so many people do, so we are blessed. Some of us are blessed in a different way to know to look elsewhere. Otherwise, no wonder 90% or whatever percentage of the population are just believe one reality. It's great, certain things coming out of Africa, certain leaders, let's just say, people claiming back their, let's just say, authenticity, equal rights. So it feels like a global shift. We can talk about the planets as well, prophecies and things like that.
Thank you. So that brings us back to what Sabina said too before. So what I'd like to really go through, do a synopsis of what we'd like people to take away from today's show, is that fear can either motivate us to stay safe, or to go a different path. Like, for example, I remember a case where there was a woman who was a very battered woman, and she just didn't know how to leave the husband. And one day, as he was coming home, she had this intense sense of fear, like doom. And she actually listened to it. She called up, I don't remember who she called up. They came and said, let's get out of here right now. It just so happened the husband had stopped to get a gun to come home and shoot her that day. And so that fear helped her. So fear can be really helpful. However, when you, every single day, you are constantly being subjected to fear over and over by mainstream everything. It's not just media. We have to remember it's mainstream medicine, it's mainstream education, it's mainstream music. Oh my gosh, the music, the lyrics that are in some of these music, and even the way the music is done to just rev you up into a fear-filled mode. And so what Pete and Sabina was saying about, it's also what you watch and what you do. So I'm going to put something up here on the screen. And above all, every day, watch with glittering eyes the whole world around you, not mainstream anything, because the greatest secrets are always hidden in the most unlikely places. Those who don't believe in magic will never find it through mainstream anything, and will not find it by living a life based on fear. It's amazing that entertainment has become fearful, and it's even amazing that we live in a world where we need entertainment. So last year, the year before, I don't remember which, I was having problems with my internet, and a lot of problems. It doesn't matter what I did, I could not get online, or if I went on, it would immediately just go, leave. And so two technicians came by, and they couldn't fix it. So I called up. They said, you've got to call customer service. So I called customer service and said, I don't want this internet service anymore. I'm going to change over to a different one. And he said to me, oh, but the one that you have right now, it actually is for your TV too. You can watch TV for the same price. And I said, but I don't watch TV. And he said, no, you don't understand. You can watch all your shows in TV for the same price. I said, what shows? You said the shows you love on TV. I said, I don't love any. I don't watch TV. And there was a moment of silence. He goes, then how do you entertain yourself? I was shocked. It's like I came to Earth to be entertained, and by somebody else. I could entertain myself, or I could do like what Sabina had said, go out into the forest, which is my most favorite place to go anyway. The amount of magic that's there, watch the birds, listen to them, tweet with them, chirp with them, go dancing, take every single dance class that you've never thought you could ever do. That's where you'll find the magic that's within you. Don't look for magic on the outside of yourselves. The magic already lies within. What we need to do is take away the layers of fear until we expose the magic that is ourselves, and then we will start attracting also externally all that is magical and fearless. And so I'm going to also remind you what life is here. This is by Lao Tzu. I really love this. Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Don't resist them. The more fearful we are, the more we resist that which is magical, because that only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way they like. So I have no problem with the news. It's the way that it is spouted out to us as a fear-based thing. Instead of just stating this and this happened today, and that's it. But no, to put this almost a clutch on it, that it has to be fear-based and it has to be said in the most fearful manner possible. And what I said at the beginning about all the different, studies that have been done about fear, and as Peter said, the fear of death, which most people really is a issue for them. But I think that most people actually fear life. If one fears death, it's because one is not fully lived as yet. So I'm going to put this quote up by Plato. We can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And I think that's where most of our fear lies. It's actually the fear of the light that's within ourselves. So I urge you today, on behalf of my co-hosts and I, if you wish to start pursuing a life of being healthy, to keep the fears that keep you safe, and explore other ways also of keeping you safe. But more than that, to have faith that the universe didn't throw us here willy-nilly just to be in a sad state of affairs and to be scared. We came here really to learn who we are. And who we are is love. Love is not external, it's internal. And so, what we need to do is start living in the awe and wonder of ourselves, coming from that place within where there is no fear, where we're fearless. So, thanks everyone for coming today. One quick word from each person, Grant.
Yeah, I would fear fear takes over lives. But it's a beautiful thing as well. And when we use it the way it's meant to to affect us, it brings out the magic, like you said.
Thank you, Pete. Something about animals?
Is just quickly come in after the access that I had gone on another realm level. I was getting praise and thank you for trusting that voice, intuition. I forgot to mention, following my dreams, which I was very well rehearsed in over the 17 years, I realized consuming fear-based foods, because my journey was raw vegan, animals, obviously the adrenaline from the death consuming its energy, we're energy beings. So my whole dream state changed. So my whole reality changed. So it's a symbiotic, holistic approach.
Great. Thank you, Bly.
That's a very interesting point, Pete. Absolutely. I'll just close with, really stay connected to source, and there's nothing to fear. And I love the way Sabina said that all the answers are always within. Always remember that.
Which leads us to Sabina.
So fear not only means false evidence appearing real, like Pete mentioned, it also means face everything and rise.
Wonderful. And with that, just know that next week we will be back. We will be discussing fasting, FAST. We'll be discussing fasting or feasting. So, and that we're probably going to be doing 2 or 3 episodes of that. So tune in next week for that, because there's a lot of fear around fasting. So thanks everyone for coming here today and being faithful enough to yourself to listen and think and feel beyond fear. All the best, everyone. Thank you.